Monday, December 4, Paul in the Areopagus. No matter where he was, Paul, given his commission from God, was going to preach the gospel. So that's exactly what he sought to do in Athens. Read Acts chapter 17, verses 18 to 21. What were some of the different ways that the pagans in the marketplace reacted to Paul's speaking and questioning? Acts 17, beginning at verse 18. Then certain Epicurean and Stoic philosophers encountered him, and some said, "What does this babbler want to say?" Others said, "He seems to be a proclaimer of foreign gods, because he preached to them Jesus and the resurrection." And they took him and brought him to the Areopagus, saying, "May we know what this new doctrine is of which you speak? For you are bringing some strange things to our ears. Therefore we want to know what these things mean." For all the Athenians and the foreigners who were there spent their time in nothing else but either to tell or to hear some new thing. Then Paul stood in the midst of the Areopagus and said, "Men of Athens, I perceive that in all things you are very religious." Clearly, with his foreign gods, Paul made an impression on these people in the marketplace in verse 18, and so they took him to the Areopagus, a part of the city where legal and religious matters were adjudicated, though it does not seem as if Paul were facing any kind of legal trial. It was just, it seemed, to give him and his new doctrine, as it said in verse 19, a hearing. It would be hard to ignore someone of Paul's eloquence, passion, and intelligence, even if he were promoting ideas that seemed very strange to these people. Verse 21 says the Athenians did nothing but talk about and listen to the latest ideas. Was Paul accusing them of laziness? Probably not. More likely, he was pointing out that they were experienced thinkers and debaters. After all, the Greeks produced such men as Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, philosophers whose influence has reached down to our day as well. Athens, for centuries, had been seen as the centre of intellectual and philosophical thought. Though some of these thinkers were not atheists, certainly not in the sense that we think of atheism today, many of their philosophical ideas were radically different from the teachings of Christianity. It's hard, for example, to find a place in the philosophy of the Epicureans and Stoics for something like a resurrected Messiah. In Athens, Paul had expected that the Holy Spirit would use his knowledge and oratorical skills which he had gained in his education under Gamaliel. But, in reality, it was Paul's education on the streets of Athens that the Holy Spirit was able to use even more. As Ellen White writes in Acts of the Apostles, page 237, the wisest of his hearers were astonished as they listened to his reasoning. He showed himself familiar with their works of art, their literature, and their religion. And so to finish today, after Paul's experience in Athens with these pagans and philosophers, he wrote to the Corinthians that, "I determined not to know anything among you except Jesus Christ and him crucified." And that's from 1 Corinthians chapter 2 and verse 2. What lesson is there for us about how central Christ must be to our message, regardless of whom we are preaching to? You have been listening to a reading of the Adult Sabbath School lessons by Dr. Percy Harrold, and the inside story by his niece Sibylla. Apart from being provided free to those who are visually impaired, these audio lessons are available on the official General Conference Sabbath School and Personal Ministry app, on SoundCloud, Apple iTunes, and also on YouTube. Search for Percy Harrold Sabbath to find all of these. And remembering all the time that God is always faithful.